I head up the services here at Flow. So anything having to do with implementation, education, training, support, or partnerships, I handle. And I've met each of you individually through the provisioning work that I've done to enable you to use the full power of the Flow editor prior to this class. Nice meeting you all.
Cool. And Sierra.
Hi everyone, I'm Sierra. I'm a flow designer, so I'm working hands-on in the editor most of the time, working to design and build flows. So I'll be here if you need me. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or anything at all. But it's great to have you all here. Super excited to see where this training session can go.
Hi, I'm Jason Marsh, and I founded the company 5 years ago, and just really excited to have you all join us today. And there's a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, we have 3 of our engineers are online, will be in all of these trainings because they want to learn when they see you click around and hopefully not get too confused, but get confused. That's the kinds of things that we want to know. So I'm going to call out Tavares, Alexei, and Vitali as our 3 of our amazing engineers. We're all here to learn from you during these sessions. So 2 things I want to communicate. One is that you guys have all been recruited into the Flow tribe. And let me describe that for just a moment. So we started the company as a virtual reality company, and VR didn't really take off. And so we struggled for a number of years. Really, this last year is when we focused in on data storytelling, and that has really settled in with our customers and the enthusiasm that has generated. But for a long time, we felt like we were standing in a field, dancing all by ourselves, without people really caring very much. And it was, pretty challenging times, right? And eventually we started noticing all these folks just really love what we do and feel like they're dancing in this field with us. And so by definition, you guys are enthusiastic, you're part of the tribe, and each and every one of you has something that you can communicate to us that we can learn from to help us build a better product. And our big picture goal is actually to help people make better data-driven decisions and to solve the world's problems, whether it's our personal problem, in our enterprise, or at the UN, it's a global problem. I think that humanity's got some problems and we need to help people solve them better. And we think data communication, data storytelling is gonna help do that. So that's a big vision. Okay. There's one other idea I want to communicate, which is about cool. And when people see what we do, they go, oh, that's cool. And I just want to let you guys know that we didn't build it to be cool. Cool is, let me define cool for a second. So cool is like a great skateboard trick, or maybe it's Tony Stark and Iron Man flicking his atoms to build something, right? But that cool actually is meaningful. It's a sense of mastery and control. So the skateboarder has control over gravity, over whatever. And that is the feeling that we see and we say, oh, that's cool. So what we're building at Flow and what we want you guys to build, yes, it will be cool, but it actually needs to be really meaningful to help, like I say, help solve problems, help change the world, help. And if we've done it right, we and you can help your audience gain that sense of mastery and control, feel like they're experiencing the data instead of just looking at it on a flat screen. And if they can be part of that experience, then that's where we're going to change minds and move humanity forward. So I'll stop there, but that gives you one of the, if you're not careful, I'll talk about brain science all day long, but one of the things that I just hope that you'll understand that we can really make something meaningful, not just cool, and let's all learn how to do that together.
Well said. Thanks, Jason. So with that, let's kick things off or start to dive in, and we'll go through a few sections here just as a primer logistically. So we have today, which is sort of our kickoff session, where we're going to go through a multitude of different flows to inspire you and help for you determine your own data set to bring to us for next week. And then starting next week, we'll have Tuesday and Thursday, and then following Tuesday and Thursday, Same times 8 and 5 for signing up. Except for, well, there'll be one more detail, but anyways, we'll schedule or send more logistics stuff after this. But let's dive into Flow. So ultimately what we're solving for at Flow are sort of 3 fundamental data communication problems. And what I'm showing you is Flow. So we'll actually cover this, but this idea that you can see my face and the content at the same time, we're using what we call Flow TriCast, which allows you to basically share anything on your screen and your image at the same time, and all sorts of different adjustments. But ultimately what we're solving for are sort of 3 things. One is levels of engagement in a meeting. Is your audience actually paying attention, or are they checking email, doing something else? 2, levels of understanding, especially when it comes to complex data. Do people really understand what you're describing, or are they sort of nodding along in agreement, but not really following? And then lastly is levels of interaction, especially when it comes to driving the other 2 of understanding and engagement. Having that level of interaction allows people to feel part of the meeting and feel part of the conversation. And that by doing these, we can help drive better data-driven decisions, and in a sales use case, close more sales. So we see a lot of pursuits and proposals and consulting and things like that where Flow is being utilized. And so to help do this, we do that through data storytelling. And data storytelling is really this layer that sits between analysis on sort of the data visualization side and the presentation side, which is sort of summarizing things down into the main story. So it's adding the powerful empathy, the narrative with the data and the visualizations to drive data stories. And that's really what we're after. We are a data storytelling platform. How do we better convey information to a non-expert audience? That is sort of our bread and butter and sort of what we've focused on. And so to help illustrate, what is a data story, let me start off real basic here and just start off with a country example, looking at the 2020 election. So a map like this after the 2020 election this is looking at every county, and then in the Northeast, it's every township. But Donald Trump would look at a map like this and necessarily say, wow, the whole country voted red, because you see this sea of red. But that the counter argument to that is that land doesn't vote, people vote. And so if we adjust the height of these bars based on the number of votes that were cast, a very different story emerges. One in which the population centers of the United States are mostly voting Democrat. And then we can take this one step further, which is to actually change the colors based on the ratio of Republicans to Democrats that voted. And so we see the country is a little more purple as opposed to so binary blue versus red. So this is just one illustrative example of one. Now, I want to take this sort of to the next level here. And actually invite you guys into a Flow experience live together. And so to facilitate that, I'm going to ask everyone to basically grab their cell phones, and we're actually going to dive into a mobile AR experience to sort of kick things off. And this is going to be one that's a little more fun. And then we will basically come back to some more educational flows here. What I'll do is, if everyone can open up their phone, and essentially, if you open up the camera of your phone, and this works for both iPhones and Android phones. So if you open up the camera on your phone and point it to this QR code that is showing on my screen, I will make this just a little bigger too, so people can get to it. What will happen is that it will basically ask you or prompt you to open up that link. Now, if you have an iPhone, or let me just keep going through this actually, sorry. So once that loads, what I encourage everyone to do is basically to enter your name. So you'll enter your name here. And what I really want people to do is to hit the AR button in the top right-hand corner. And what that's going to do is basically drop everyone into augmented reality, where we will actually be in the scene together in our own room. So you might want to get up or actually walk around and move around this object. But I think this is going to be a pretty fun little experience for everybody to see. So when you hit that AR button, and I'll just share my screen here real quick so people can see.
Michael, you might want to turn off the avatars or pass.
Oh, sure. Let me do that. Well, no, I want to keep them on for this one, but I'll turn them off for the next one.
Okay.
Unless, are people very much in the way? I think it's going to be.
Yeah, that's my
sweet.
concern.
Yeah, no, the content's less important here. So this is more just for fun to go through sort of a, what could this be or what this looks like in AR. So I see a lot of phones here, which is good. So have people been able to successfully hit the AR button and place the object in their room? Okay, cool. So I'm going to mute everybody, including myself, so that this audio feedback doesn't. Click next.
Okay, so Michael, with so many avatars rendering at the same time, the animations aren't rendering smoothly. So
Yeah, I'm trying to click the button now. Okay, so I just hit all avatars. Okay. Well, this is the beauty of a live demo, that you guys are all getting to see the sausage making here. So I'm going to close this window. Stop that. So apologies for a little bit of the avatar madness there that caused some of the animations to stop. When we get that one going, I'll send out a link so you can actually go through it on your own experience. But hopefully that just gives you a little bit of a sense for what's possible here. And yeah, let's keep going here. Jason, was there anything else you wanted to do on that one? Apologies that the avatar sort of crashed that one.
Yeah, with this many users, and I think that yeah, we didn't test it beforehand in that situation. So for me, it didn't work. I didn't see any of the animations, which is the whole point of actually that particular cool thing. So right. FYI, we'll, simpler flows will do what you want to show. We'll show what you want to show, Michael.
Yeah. Yep. Sounds good. Okay. So I'll turn off avatars on this next one. And so I'm going to put this next link just in the chat window here for everyone to be able to participate. So send this to everybody. All right. So I just put a link in the chat window that will invite everyone into this scene. And what we're looking at here is exactly what we were looking at before, which is the US election map. And I'll keep avatars off so that we're not interfering with one another. But part of this idea of being able to interact with the contents, I'm just going to give you a few instructions here. The main instruction is that if you click and drag your mouse, you will move around the scene. If you right click, you will actually start to strafe left and right or up and down. And then to zoom, you scroll in or out with your scroll wheel. And that's going to be how you interact. And so I'm just going to quickly turn off avatars or turn on avatars just so people can see. So here we are all in a room together, and you can see everyone here with their name and their avatar face. And yeah, this is actually kind of awesome. So anyways, we're all here in the same environments and able to select information. Now, obviously, with this many people, it is a little chaotic. But this idea that we can all sort of see what people are looking at, be able to interact with the information, we're starting to imitate what it would feel like to be there in person. And this does work in person. It does work in AR where we can actually stand around the content ourselves. But let's just expand this one level further, which is to say, data is not just geospatial, but data can also be, network graphs. And so if we look at this graph in particular, we're looking at the reproductive value of COVID. And this is sort of the mathematical model of what we see as R squared, the R value, where things double or exponentially every node. So 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, etc. And so being able to graph networks, as well as then lastly time series, that here we're looking at time series data by animating it through, and I'll turn off avatars for this piece here. And so we can look at what happened this past, or in 2020, where in the start of the year, we hit the pandemic in March and suddenly foot traffic breaks apart, like no one's going anywhere. And then over the summer, we see sort of this increase in foot traffic at places like Home Depot, which I think is an interesting story where I think we all got sick of our house, or we noticed all the defects in our house, or been a little too much time at home. So finding our summer projects there. And so obviously I'm making up the story to go along with this content, but I think gives you a sense of what's possible here. So hopefully this is working for you guys to see the interactions on mobile. I definitely started off with something a little too bold to start with, but I think that is okay. So from this, what I'm going to go to is the flow editor and show you actually just a little brief intro of how we actually create these. And then I'm going to pass it over to Bill after that, and Bill's going to help lay a foundation for how we actually or some of the core things to know in the flow editor, so that as you build yourself, you sort of have a firm foundation and know where you can get help, support, etc. So what I'm showing on my screen is the flow editor. So you'll have full access to this. There is an advanced tab here, just so you're aware that there's a lot of other things that are hidden, but to try to keep the UI pretty basic here. And so just as a case example, we can select data from our library. For this one, I'm going to use the for training life expectancy data. And so right away, you're seeing every dot come into place. And every dot here is a thing. It is a row of the data set. And this is just a CSV file, which is the main thing you guys will be uploading is CSV files into the platform. And from this, we can start to add some logic. And so what I'll do is add a step, which is the same as adding a keyframe in an animation or a slide into a PowerPoint deck. And then I'm going to start to order this in a more logical way. So I'll put the year on the horizontal axis. Let me put life expectancy on the height axis. And then on the depth axis, I'll put the different countries. So right away, we're starting to see this take shape. And it's really kind of amazing because the last 100 years or so, life expectancy has been increasing everywhere, which is in some ways humanity's greatest success. But that in other ways, there's some of these points very low that are some of humanity's greatest failures. And so there's more we can do here. So we can add a color scheme in here based on something like the continent. We can adjust the sizes based on something like the population. And we can add connections. And so I'll add connections up here based on the country. And so we're starting to see this take even more shape. And let me add one last step, which is to zoom in to some more detail. And on this, what I'll do is add a filter. And on this filter, I'm going to look at the years between, I'll look between 1918, so do 1915 to 1920. And so now we can see this huge decline in life expectancy across the globe. And this was the 1918 Spanish flu. So the last pandemic to hit the world, where we can see, in the data set itself within life expectancy, this huge dramatic change. And obviously there's way more we could do here. We can add labels, we can order it, we can sort it. There's different views we can go through. And in fact, as part of our lesson, we might actually go through this data set in particular, because within this data set, you can actually go through almost every type of data set or chart type, even maps and timelines and all sorts of different views of the data set. So I think it's a good primer to start with. So we'll go further into detail there. But before I do that, let me just pause here for a moment. I know we've sort of just been talking at you to get any initial takes, any questions that have come up, or any other comments from the group.
Pablo has a question in the chat.
Do filter options change depending on available columns features of the data sets? So it does, yes. So Well, partially. So the filters here, yes,
Reshare
for
your
certain
screen.
attributes like year, where it
Reshare your screen.
So for objects or objects like year, where so when you filter, you'll be able to see all of the column names in your data sheet. So that will update based on your data sets. And then for the different attribute you select, if it's a date column, then automatically the dates fields will show up here. If we choose just a number, then you have a different set of options. And if you choose something that is a categorical variable, you have a different set of options where it either contains, doesn't contain it. So that, I can filter something like United States, maybe. So you can filter based on the actual consequence. You can filter based on a categorical variable. So yeah, that's how you apply filters. So yeah, good question. Any other questions here? Limitations on size of data, number of rows. Great question. So right now we try to limit the number of dots to less than 60,000. We recommend, however, to stay at least around 40,000, if not less. And so the number of rows in your data set should be around there, and that there is a limit of 10 megabytes for the file size. So there are some limits. And so you might want to do some aggregation or some processing before you actually upload the CSV file into Flow. That is something we're actively working around to build more data integrations and make this the pipeline to get data in more of the focus. But for most of our customers, it is a sort of point in time data typically. And so they don't necessarily want things refreshed or super live. So anyways, we'll keep adding to that. Jason, is there anything else you'd like to add? And
yeah, let me just mention that one. So remember, this is a data communication system as opposed to data analysis on its own right. And if you want a phone to render a visualization, we just can't get millions of data points. The GPU isn't powerful enough, et cetera. So we limit the number of points, and we still really value that experience of awe and wonder with lots of points, especially you start out with a big view and then you drill down, not just see the forest, but then see the trees and the branches and things like that. So the big view does give you a really nice sense of awe, and we love that. But it's just not practical to expect millions of points, and therefore we got to have some sort of line that we draw in terms of that. In terms of connecting to databases, Pablo asked about connected databases like Mongo. In the base Flow editor, it's in CSV uploads, and probably tomorrow, the next day, we'll have Google Sheets integration as well. But custom integrations to databases, we think of each and every integration at this point as more custom work, and we do that for our enterprise customers, and happy to have the conversation with you on how that would work. Obviously, you've got to have a good clean data feed and make sure that the data is in a reasonable format, and so all of those tend to take a little bit more custom coding. So happy to talk to you about that.
Yeah,
Pablo.
So I'm going to pass it over to Bill here. So Bill is just incredible at customer success and has a good foundation in just helping people understand sort of some of the basics of the Flow editor to help you orient and understand the timeline. So Bill, if I can ask you to share your screen and just talk people through some of that foundational element, and then I'll go through another flow before we go into our little breakout rooms.
Yeah, okay, great. Hi, everybody. Everybody see my screen okay? Okay, so I just have about 5 minutes here. So what I'm going to do is just give you a quick introduction to kind of the place where the heartbeat of the Flow editor occurs. And that is right down here on the very bottom of the screen. We call this the objects timeline. And using this objects timeline, if you are looking at a step in a flow, and a flow consists of one or more steps, okay? If you're looking at a step in a flow, you can see every object that is active on that step because it's highlighted in a color. So swarms are yellow. So if I were to single click on this cell here, Over on the right-hand side of my screen is the entire definition of that swarm, okay? So this is the paradigm we use. You navigate over here, like if I want to see the definition of a map, I click on this cell, which is a map cell. Okay? Over on the right-hand side, the whole definition of the map is available to you. Similarly for images and text box. Let me just illustrate a text box here. Yeah, so, learn to navigate in here. If you're ever looking somewhere else to get to someplace, you're probably looking in the wrong spot. This object's timeline, that's what it's designed for. Now, this particular step, which is step number 4 in the presentation that Michael opened this session with, and I can see looking on here, there's a swarm. A swarm is where all the data lives. If you ever see a dot, these dots on a screen, that's a data swarm. So there's one swarm here. Its definition is over on the right-hand side. There's one map. That's this one right here. There are 2 images. It turns out this is an image right here, and this is an image. And it turns out there's 3 text objects on here. So, and each of these objects has its own characteristic. So you'll grow to understand those quite well over time. So when you're constructing a flow, you'll begin with just a single step that we set up for you when you create your new flow. And Michael will be going over that a little bit later. You'll be building up your flow consisting of many steps. Now, here's a hint that I found to be very helpful. If you can get a hold of one of our flows, for example, this one, which is the flow of flow, okay, which is on our featured flows page. If you can get a hold of this, make a copy of it in your own private directory. What you can do is you can start exploring these objects here from the timeline, and you can see exactly how this flow was built. So, if I wanted to see how Michael constructed this swarm here with this circular array of columns, I can go over here and I can see, oh, okay, here's a swarm number 4. He chose categorized columns as the object he's going to present in this. He could have chosen a scatter plot or other things. He chose categorized columns and in a circular array. So this is how he got this object to appear on the screen, and so on. So I'm not going to go into any more of the detail here other than that. Over here, if you're ever creating a new swarm, the way you do that is over here on this part of the screen. If you're creating a new map, you do that here. If you're putting a new image here, and so on. One other thing I just want to say is a very, very important concept of flow is that every object is available on every step. So this swarm, number 1, it's available on all 13 steps. Now, it turns out it's only visible. We've chosen to make it only visible on 5 of them, okay? And the way you control the visibility and invisibility of a swarm an object on a step is this little eye icon over here. This is day number 1 for this method of turning this on and off, by the way. So I just clicked it here and the swarm went away. Okay, it's no longer visible on the step. So I just clicked it again. The swarm should come back. Let's see. Okay, it doesn't seem to be coming back in the way I expected it to, but let's see what happens here. Okay, so Michael, maybe we make a note here that for some reason we lost the categorized columns here.
Oh,
I'm
got
not
it.
sure why that should not have happened just by me making that invisible on the step. So
Yeah.
anyway,
It's okay. That's what happens when we just pushed
of the
a
live
new.
demo.
Yeah, I think we pushed a new feature just right before.
Yeah,
so anyways, we'll figure that out. But yeah, thank you, Bill, for going through that.
Yeah, so does anybody have any questions on what I've said here? You'll spend a fair amount of time in this area of the screen. Okay, hey, thanks everybody.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for going through that, Bill. If you can stop sharing your screen here. I'm just gonna go through just a few other things here. And then we're gonna save the last basically 15 minutes here, and we're gonna go into our small breakout groups, where then we'll get to meet sort of our team captains and get to introduce one another. So you guys can introduce or interact as well with us. So I'm going to go through just one other flow here to sort of set a bit more of the tone in terms of art of the possible. And the reason I'm going to show this one in particular is to show the different modalities that we were able to present it using. So this is the Texas, a flow around the Texas blackout. And I'll once again put a link here into the chat window for people to join live. Now, there was one question in the chat window related to aggregation and calculated fields. Right now, those are being done prior to ingesting into Flow. So doing it in R or even just in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever you're using is necessary now for aggregation or adding calculated fields and things like that. But I will say that we are actively working on things to help improve that data ingestion, both in terms of unpivoting. We actually do have formulas built in right now that will do aggregation. It's just not revealed in the UI yet. So these are coming, they're in there, we recognize them, it's just not there yet. We've really focused in on just what do we do well right now, or what do we focus on, and it's really the data communication piece. And so the calculations right now are sort of secondary. So hopefully that jives with everybody. And so yeah, let me actually go through this.
Let me jump in just on one more quick comment on that, which is, we really don't see ourselves as like competitors to Tableau or Power BI, where you have or even R or Python, where you have an infinite array of ways of manipulating your data. That's great. And if we thought we were competitors, that would be a challenge for us in the business that we're going for. Instead, we're solving this fundamental problem of how do you communicate to a non-technical audience that data? And those are things that Power BI and Tableau have many more challenges doing, especially if you try to turn it into a story. So we've been focused on our uniqueness, but like Michael says, we will build more of those features as time goes on.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And so I'm going to quickly show just a small clip from here. So this is the flow I'm going to go through. And the reason I'm showing you this is that, this is how we record for the AR videos that you see. It's just literally a cell phone in the scene. And you'll see I'm actually wearing a VR headset to present this. So I'm showing you sort of the art of the possible here, not recommending that everyone go grab a headset and use that as the main way to present. A little hard for eye contact to your audience, but just to show you sort of what's possible here and what we're building works in a VR headset, works in an AR headset, works on your mobile, works in mobile AR, and works on flat screen. So those are sort of some important elements here. So let's actually go through this flow in particular, because I think this one's, I'm biased because it's one of my favorites, but I also think it's a good example of how you show lots of different data together and how they influence one another. And it's one thing that's really good within spatial computing is your ability to layer information on top of one another. And so to understand this story, there's sort of two things you need to understand. One is the frequency of electricity, where typically frequency is around 60 hertz. And if it drops below this 59.4 hertz, that essentially is causing damage to equipment on the grid, both generators and any motors. And so there's actually timers that will turn off and disconnect power plants from the grid to prevent that. And so the other thing to understand is that Texas is its own grid. So there's the Western interconnect and the Eastern interconnect, and Texas is its own grid essentially. And so there's four things we're going to look at. One is the temperature in Fahrenheit, two is the demand in megawatts, three is the supply, and fourth is the price in US dollars. And so, the basic story here is that it got cold in Texas. And there's more details here of how cold it got, but typically it's in the 50s. and it went below freezing here in February. And at the same time, we see an increase in demand. So more electricity being used as more people are heating their houses as it's getting cold. The last outage was in 2011 in the winter for Texas, and that was actually at 59 gigawatts. And so already they're well beyond that peak at around 72 gigawatts on the night of the 14th. Now, on the capacity side, where generating electricity, there's 108 megawatts total capacity in the system overall, and that's made up of different components, half of which is natural gas, wind power, and then coal, solar, and nuclear make up the rest. And so you'll see this bar on top, which represents 100% capacity for each, which is more or less the start of things, and where we see the first decline in generation is on the wind side, where we see a decline in wind generation capacity. Now, if I move forward here, we can really start to see what happens when we look at the price. When we look at the price on the 10th and 11th, we're around normal, around $30 as the settlement price for electricity. And on the 12th, it jumps by 10x, right? We're at $300. And then I want to give you a sense of scale for the 13th and 14th. So I'm not going to adjust this y-axis, but we're going to see the prices jump way up. And just how high, we're going to 7,000 now. And so giving you that sense of scale, I think helps understand that no power has been turned off, but clearly something's going on because they're doing everything in their power to incentivize anyone to generate electricity, recognizing that things are getting very close to one another. Now, moving forward just a little further, this is when the outages started happening. And this was the evening of the 10th, I believe. And this is where we see a huge decline in natural gas generation. And apologies for this percentage change. It's just a rounding thing we have to resolve. But anyways, we see a third of natural gas basically being turned offline. And so if we go back to the operations center, we can essentially imagine this scenario where when they turn off customers, it has the effect of keeping the frequency down, increasing the frequency. And anytime the power plant goes offline, it has the effect of decreasing the frequency. And so more plants keep going offline, and they decide basically to turn off more customers. And so at 1:51 in the morning, they are actually below that threshold. So this timer has started. And this is why Texas was essentially 4 minutes away, I think 4 minutes and 30 seconds away from a complete blackout, one of which would have almost taken a month to recover from. And so it was at 1:51 that it determined to turn off 3 gigawatts total of customers. Now, the last outage, they turned off 4 gigawatts total. So this is not a small outage. This is a pretty large call to turn off 3 gigawatts worth of customers. And then later, they're still below that threshold, 4 minutes later. And so that's when they turn off 3.5 gigawatts. And then they're above that threshold and sort of back in the safe spot away from a complete blackout. And this is that outage. It's turning off 20 gigawatts worth of customers total during that period. This affected 4.5 million customers, had more damages even than Katrina, $195 billion, and caused 70 people to die. And I feel like understanding sort of the root cause here is important, and seeing how all of these variables sort of played with one another and influence one another, and being able to see how they dynamically interact, I think is part of the elements here. And so everything is interacted. You can click basically on anything. So I'll pause there. Jason, Bill, Sierra, is there anything I missed or things you'd like to add? And then to everyone else, any other comments or things you'd like to add into this story?
I'll just mention that, you could do this as a PowerPoint, and each one of those steps is a slide in your deck, right? But why I think this is different is essentially the brain science. I told you I'd talked about brain science. So when you take all of these, these 4 different visuals and line them up on your screen next to each other, we can share it here. And you still have the ability to look up and look down and move around. Your brain can build a single mental model of all of these at the same time. And when you put them in PowerPoint, and each time you put a slide in front of you and then it disappears, and a slide and it disappears, your brain doesn't have as easy a way to organize it spatially. And in fact, the hippocampus, which is this little organ in our brain, which gives us our spatial awareness and helps govern our long-term memory, that little hippocampus gets confused every time a PowerPoint slide disappears. It doesn't know how to deal with something that's not physical in the real world, that's just going away. And we've all done it. We've sat through PowerPoint presentations. We go to these conferences, slide after slide and presentation, and we can't remember anything. So by putting, even on a flat screen, by putting it into this kind of a view where I can still look around, my brain is still filled in these other visualizations, even when they're outside the edges of the frame. And that's one of the things about brain science that we've, specifically coded into the software to try to help people understand things better.
Perfect. Thanks, Jason. So with the last 14 minutes here, we're going to go into 3 breakout groups. One is going to be my breakout group, one is going to be Jason's, and then the other is going to be Sierra and Bill. And these are going to be sort of our teams. So we are going to use the power of the random button essentially in the breakout rooms. And this is going to be how we're basically going to pick rooms. And then from there, just remember who your sort of team captain is. And so on each of our teams in our breakout rooms, let's try to go through some brief introductions so that we get to know one another and where people are coming from. And yeah, that we'll be competing. And yeah, anyways, we'll go from there. And then we'll probably reconvene here just for the last minute or two to talk through next steps for our Tuesday session. But before I do that, any questions or things to bring up with the group? I'm going to create 3 breakout rooms and assign people. Right. Sequence here in that room. It's all right. Cool. Hey, everybody. All right.
Hello.
Cool. So this is going to be the winning team. Just going to announce that we're going to definitely win this thing. So I'm like fairly competitive. So let's win this. But yeah, let's just do a quick round of intros. So let me turn off